to share some things with you. Hopefully, that will resonate within your heart. As always, as has already been acknowledged, that we're in the season of Hanukkah, uh, among other seasons. And as we approach the time of Hanukkah, of course, we're going to talk about menorahs. We're going to talk about oil and miracles and Maccabees and all those kinds of things. And you'll get enough of that, I'm sure. I want to tell you a different Hanukkah story, if I may. And we're going to go all the way back to the very beginning to tell this particular Hanukkah story. Because Hanukkah, while it means dedication, I would suggest to you that a better definition is rededication. Because if you know the story of Hanukkah, then you know that it was really about rededicating something that had been clean, had been pure, had been dedicated, had been consecrated, but had become polluted, had become dirty, and it had to be rededicated. And so I want to kind of go ahead and impress upon you that concept as we begin. But before we actually get into the scripture, I want to pray. Okay? Our Father in heaven, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Father, first of all, we thank you for this time. We are grateful for this time that you have set apart, you have blessed, you have given to your people for their benefit. And we thank you for that. And we're grateful for all your goodness to us. Your word tells us that you're abundant in goodness and truth. And we just pray, Father, that you will, as we proceed through this day, that you will impress upon us that we are to emulate your goodness and that your truth would be in us. And so as we go through your word and as we discuss these things, Father, we pray that you will open our ears and heart to hear not the words of a man, but the words that you have for us within the words, the message that you have for us within the message, and that our ears would be inclined to hear your voice as your Spirit speaks to us. And so be with us today and let those things that you would impress upon us in our hearts, let them burn within us, that these temples that do become polluted, that become tainted at times, might be rededicated to you anew. We ask your blessings upon this time. We ask you to be here with us. In Yeshua's name, amen. All right, so again, the story of Hanukkah is more about rededication because, they go up to the temple, they have to run the Greeks out, they have to go in, they have to remove all of the things that shouldn't be there, the pollutants, all those things that have desecrated the Temple Mount, the temple compound. They have to go up to the mountain to remove all these things and then rededicate it. Now, it's my opinion, and I want to underscore that word, opinion, that the area that this took place in, Jerusalem specifically, or generally, and the Temple Mount specifically, I am pretty much convinced that this is where the garden was in the very beginning. In fact, I'd be so specific as to say I believe that where the temple sat is where the midst of the garden was and where the tree of life was. Because I feel that if you look at Eden, the region, and then God places a garden in Eden, and then in the garden is the midst of the garden, and then the midst of the garden is where the tree of life was. The tree of life, of course, is emblematic of the Word of God, personified in the Messiah. This is where the Creator communes with mankind, and from the very beginning, this was his ideal, to be with his people, to dwell in the midst of his people. And so it just makes sense to me that the place that he set his name was a place that he had already established where he would meet with man. So again, that's an opinion. It's a very strong opinion, by the way. So save your cards and your letters and your emails and your Facebook posts. All right? But it just makes sense to me that the place that they had to rededicate was a place that had a history of this is where the Creator wanted to commune with mankind. And so if you look at Eden, the garden, the midst of the garden, collectively as being the first earthly sanctuary, Eden would correspond to the courts, the garden to the holy place, the midst of the garden, the most holy place. And of course, again, that's where the tree of life was. Then that would further imply that Adam was not just a gardener, that Adam functioned in the role of a priest. I want you to consider this. Before the fall, Adam could freely eat of all the trees of the garden. He was told to work in the garden. He was told to till it. He was told to keep it, literally to guard it, but he could freely eat. It's only after the fall that he has to, with the sweat of your brow, you are going to eat bread. It's only after the fall that he has to go out and toil in order to eat. I'm suggesting to you, and we're not going to get into this too far today because we don't have that kind of time, that Adam functioned in the role of a priest, which would then infer that when he appeared before the Creator, he had to do things a certain way. He had to appear a certain way. Now, the Bible tells us that before the fall, that Adam and the woman were naked, but they weren't ashamed, because apparently there was nothing to be ashamed of. But after the fall, they realized they're naked, and there is something about the way their nakedness is at that point that it has to be covered. God made them skins. He made them tunics of skin where he had to cover their nakedness. In other words, to cover their shame. In fact, the Hebrew word where it says he covered them is very closely related to a term in Hebrew that means no shame. He was covering their shame. Here's what I'm getting at. Even though we realize they were naked before the fall, their nakedness doesn't seem to be anything like you and I understand nakedness to be today, because afterwards they're ashamed. Before they weren't. So some people theorize that they were clothed in a way that you and I don't really quite understand. They perhaps were robed in righteousness. Some people think they were clothed in light of some kind. We don't know for sure, but we do know that something changed. And when they fell, when they ate that forbidden fruit, when they disobeyed the Creator, and he comes into the garden and he takes the skins of animals and clothes them to cover that nakedness, that's when they're put out of the garden. That's when they're exiled, so to speak, from the sanctuary. And now Adam has to go out into the field, and he has to work, and he has to get dirty, and he has to sweat, and he has to toil. And as he's sweating and as he's toiling, his garments are going to get dirty, and they're going to get soil all over them. They're going to get all these kinds of things all over their garments because he's been forced out in the field to work. Now, later on, he's going to have a descendant by the name of Avram that the Creator in Genesis 12 speaks to. He says, I want you to leave your country, your family, your father's house. I want you to go to a land that I will show you. The writer of Hebrews tells us that when he first sets out, he has no idea where he's going. But the Creator leads him into a place called the land of Canaan. And he is in the environs of what would one day be named or be called Jerusalem. And again, I'm suggesting to you that this is where the story starts. This is where it begins. That mountain in Jerusalem, Mount Moriah. Moriah is a word that actually conveys the idea of teaching. Everything that happened there, everything that happened around there is in order to teach us some things. And so this is the place that God calls Avram to come to. And later on, he is going to take his son, Isaac, up to the top of that mountain to lift him up as an olah, a burnt offering. In the mount of the Lord, it will be seen. He said, the Lord, he will see to it in this place, in this mountain. And again, this is something I don't have time to get into today because we'd be here all afternoon. But Abraham saw a vision of something. He on the third day in Genesis 22, it said he lifted up his eyes and he saw Hamokom Merchoch. He saw the place afar off. He actually had a vision of the resurrected Messiah on the third day in the vision, and that's why he said, the Lord will provide himself the lamb. This is where all this is taking place, in the same area that I believe that Adam first served as a priest unto the Most High. Now later on, a descendant of Abraham, his grandson, in fact, Jacob, is going to have to flee from this place because his brother Esau is determined to kill him. And as he's fleeing Esau, he comes to a place that was formerly called Luz. But the sun was going down, and so he took one of the stones of that place, and it said he set it at its head. Now, I know that all of us were taught in Sunday school that he used it as a pillow. put it under his head. How many of you ever slept with your head on a rock? It's not the most comfortable thing in the world, I can't imagine anyway. I'm of the opinion he put it at his head, but as he is sleeping, he has a vision of a staircase, and on this staircase, he sees angels ascending and descending. And at the top of this staircase is the Creator, and he says, I am the God of your father Abraham and the God of your father Isaac. And wherever you go, I'm going to be with you, and I'm going to give you this land. I'm going to watch over you, and I'm going to bring you back into this land. And so Jacob has to leave this area. He has to go out, and he goes to Padan Aram. He goes to Syria. And what does he do? He has to work for Laban for close to 20 years. He has to toil. He has to sweat. He gets his clothes dirty. And beyond getting his clothes dirty, he has to deal with people. Relatives, no less. He has to just live life, and he has to deal with people being jealous of him, changing his wages, trying to cheat him, scheming against him. And he has to live a life that is worthy of later being called Israel. As a matter of fact, let me get into this just a little bit. When he sees Rachel at the well, and he falls in love with her, and he goes to Laban and contracts to work for him 7 years in order to marry this woman. And he fulfills that contract. And he says, give me my wife. You know the story. On the wedding night, he goes into the tent. And inside the tent it's not Rachel, it's Leah. Here's something that's always kind of puzzled me. Considering that God appeared to Jacob at the place formerly known as Luz, that, by the way, he called Bethel, the house of God, because God was in this place. I didn't even know it, he says. So he named it Bethel, the house of El, the house of God. But God spoke to him there. I am going to keep you. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to watch over you. I'm going to be your God. He could appear to him and speak to him and impress upon him this. And yet, when Jacob is about to go into the tent to consummate a marriage, why isn't there an angel over in the bushes going, psst, hey, don't go in there. It's a trap. He let him go on going in there. Of course, and the next day, behold, it was Leah. And he goes to his father-in-law, you deceived me. Why did you do this? Well, around here, it's not good for the younger one to get married off before the older one. So that's why I did it. He tricked him. He deceived him. And this is what he had to contend with for 20 years. Now, might it be that the one who said, I'm going to watch over you, I'm going to keep you, I'm going to protect you, I'm going to bring you back into this land, allowed him to go through those things, to go through being cheated, deceived, lied to, manipulated, threatened, not to see the evil in others, but to see what was in his heart. Was this man worthy of being called Israel? What I'm trying to suggest to you is that because man has fallen, we have to endure things. We have to go through things. And working out in the field means sometimes your clothes get dirty. I would suggest it's a definite thing that your clothes are going to get dirty. When I work out in the garden or tending to animals and things like that, the more weary I become, the less I'm concerned about how much dirt and stuff I get on my clothes. Let me say it again. When I become weary, I'm not as concerned about how much dirt I'm getting on me. It's like, whatever. Do you understand what I'm trying to hint at here? We go through life, we have to deal with situations, we have to deal with people, and in spite of the fact that we are admonished not to become weary in well-doing, how many of you have found it at times difficult not to become weary in well-doing? And I'm suggesting that there are times when we're weary, when we're beaten down, when we're worn down, and we are dealing with events and situations and people and some things out of our control, some of our making. The more weary we become, the less conscious we are of how dirty our garments are becoming. Jacob will eventually leave. He'll come back into the land. God spoke to him and says, now it's time for you to go back to the land of your fathers. And of course, he's going to encounter Esau, and there's that exchange. But I want to bring you over to Genesis chapter 25, something very interesting, I believe anyway. He's coming back into the land after 20 years of being out in the world, out in the field, so to speak. And in Genesis 35, verse 1, God said to Jacob, arise and go up to Bethel. Remember, this is the place where he had the vision of the staircase. Arise and go up to Bethel and dwell there and make an altar there to God who appeared to you when you fled from the face of Esau, your brother. And listen to what Jacob says. He said to his household and to all who were with him, put away the foreign gods that are among you, purify yourselves, and change your garments. Why? Because we're going to go up to the mountain. And why are we going up to the mountain? Because we are going to have an encounter with the Almighty. And we've been out here amongst the nations. We've been out here among people. We've been out here amongst the stuff, dealing with this, dealing with that. And our garments have become polluted. They've become soiled. They've become tainted. But we're going up to the mountain. And so we have to put all these things away. And it's time to change our garments. Later on, when Jacob has to go down into Egypt, his family is sojourning there. They grow into a multitude. And God, through the plagues culminating in the Pesach, he brings them out of Egypt because they have placed their trust in the blood of a lamb, no less. And he brings them to the mountain. And at the foot of the mountain, through Moses, he speaks to them and he says this. On the third day, I'm going to come down and I'm going to appear to you. We're going to meet. But before that happens, you need to do something. You need to wash your clothes. You need to change your garments, so to speak. You need to purify yourselves. It doesn't escape him that they've been amongst the nations. He's the one that sent them down into Egypt. And by the way, while they were in Egypt, Egypt got in them. And they're tainted with the mindset of Egypt, with the sights and the sounds and the smells and even the food of Egypt. They've got all this stuff that's become part of them. But before they can come to the mountain, meet the Creator, and have that encounter, they have to wash and they have to change their clothes. Remember, if I'm correct and Adam functioned in the role of a priest, then in some way that maybe I don't know how to articulate, he wore the garments, if you will, of a priest. But when he was sent out of the garden, he just had the skins of animals, and he had to toil out in the field, and he had to work, and he had to get dirty. That's what happens when we're out away from the mountain. That's what happens when we're out among people. We get dirty. I want to share a story with you, and I've done this a couple of times through the years. Before I do, I want to say that my reason for sharing this is not to draw attention to my own personal experience as much as it is to use my personal experience in the hopes that it speaks to others. And I just have to feel that it will probably close to, going on 30 years, some time ago. I was a new believer. Even though I'd been raised in church, I was familiar with church. I grew up and started playing music, and I found out that if you played guitar and sang, there were girls who really dug that. And so that I kind of I kind of went down that road for a little while, and it didn't end well, frankly. But got married. God used my wife to save my life, literally. And got married, and we moved to Florida, and I was born again, or rededicated my life, however you like to look at it. And we were in this church for just a little while, and I was very zealous, and I was very energetic, and I felt like God was just showing me things and speaking to me, and I was growing in leaps and bounds and in knowledge of the Scripture, and it was just like He dumped things into me. I don't know how else to explain it. But I was working with a paint company at the time, and I came home for lunch one day, and I was going to sit down for lunch, and I was just suddenly just so very sleepy. I couldn't keep my eyes open. And I told Beth, I said, I'm going to go lay down in the bedroom for a little while. And so I went into the bedroom, and I can still see it today. I just kind of lay down on my stomach, put my head down, and immediately I was out. But what was strange about it was I knew I was asleep, but I was conscious of everything that was in the room. It was like I was seeing everything through my eyelids. I don't know if that makes any sense to you. Even though I knew I was asleep. So it was just very soon thereafter that I wasn't in my bedroom anymore. And I was standing on a hilltop. And I was standing on this hilltop, and out before me were these other hills, and they were just golden. The look to them, this hue that was over these hills, they were golden. Standing next to me is another man, and I knew that on the other side of him was another. And I knew that there were 12. I don't know if it was 12 including me or 12 plus me. I don't know. It was just I knew that there were 12. And this man had on this white linen garment, and he was barefoot. And I looked at myself, and I was wearing a white garment, and I was barefoot. Now, I have to interject this part into the story. I hate feet. They are the ugliest appendage on the human body. I don't like my feet. I don't like your feet. It's a no-no for men to wear flip-flops in my presence. It's bad enough when women wear them, but at least women take care of their feet. But when guys wear them, so you will never see me wearing sandals or flip-flops. You will never see these feet. All right? Now, having made my point, I'm looking at my feet in this dream I'm having, and I'm looking at the guy's feet next to me, and I'm thinking, those are the most beautiful feet I have ever seen. And I'm looking at every little detail in his feet. And we're standing here on this hilltop. And as I'm taking all of this in, there is, off in this direction, there is a structure that I cannot look directly on it. Because every time I tried to look directly at it, my heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. And I knew God is there. Now, this all happened in an instant. And I'm just trying to take all this in. And I've tried 2 or 3 different times to look directly at this place where I knew God was, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't look directly on it because I felt like I was just going to die if I did. And so I turned my attention to those men, looking at this guy's feet and in awe of how beautiful those feet were. Now, I'm a new believer at this point. So I wake up from that and going, what in the world was that about? And I go tell my wife, look, I just had this really weird dream. And I related it to her, and she's like, what does it mean? I'm like, I don't know what it means. I don't know. A few weeks later, we had some friends over from the church. And Beth says, why don't you tell them about your dream? So I told them about my dream. And this one girl's looking at me really strange. She's like, don't you get it? I'm like, well, get what? She said, how beautiful are the feet of them upon the mountains that bring good news. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she says, go to Isaiah. And I went to Isaiah, and I'm like, oh my gosh, wow, what does it mean though? What does it mean? So all this is stirring in my head now. And I get this invitation to go to Jerusalem. This would be in 1990. And I'm going to be part of the music team with the International Christian Embassy of Jerusalem during the Feast of Tabernacles. I didn't know what the Feast of Tabernacles was at that time. I just thought, Jerusalem? Cool, I'll go. And there was a lot of experiences there. But one day, they took us out to the Has Promenade. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Israel, but there's this place that is kind of south of the city, and it's on this hill, and it overlooks the old city and the Judean hills, and it's beautiful. And they took us out there for a venue where we were going to sing. And they dressed us guys in all white, and they made us wear sandals. So as we're just kind of sitting around waiting for everything to begin, it's getting, on into the afternoon, early evening. The sun is beginning to set behind us, going down over the Mediterranean. And the director comes by, and as he walks by, he wheels around real quick, and he looks at me, and he says, "Bull." Well, he was from South Africa. He couldn't say Bill. He said bull. And if you knew me, you would know how apropos that really is. So he says, "Bull, do you have a song to sing?" I'm like, wow, what? So he gets me, and he pushes me up to the microphone, and I'm trying to figure out, what am I supposed to sing? And as I look out across the Judean hills, the sun is setting, casting a golden hue over the hills. And I look over here, and all these guys that I'm with are all dressed in white. And I'm looking at their feet. And over there is the Temple Mount. And just that quickly, I felt this voice said, "This is not the fulfillment. It's just, I wanted you to know that was for me." What is that prophecy in Isaiah about? It's about the restoration of all things. It's about the restoration of Zion. It's about Israel coming into the fulfillment of their purpose. And by Israel, I don't mean one person. I mean a nation. But like the Israel of old, you and I have been out in the field. We've been out among the nations. We've been out having to deal with this, that, and the other, and circumstances, and family, and people, and jobs, and loss, and trial, and tribulation. And in the midst of all those things, at least this is what I'm finding, I've allowed my garments to get dirty. A few years ago, I was going through a very difficult time. Our family was. Very difficult time. It was one of those times that, I won't give you all the gory details, but I would have thoughts of like, God, sometimes I just think that it would be easier just to lay down and go to sleep. And that be it. It was so oppressive. And it was during that time that one night I really couldn't sleep. And so I got up off the bed and I went to the living room. And I lay down on the couch. And as soon as I lay down on the couch, almost immediately I went to sleep. But even though I knew I was asleep, I was conscious of everything around me. I was conscious of the room. It was like I was seeing through my eyelids again. It's only happened to me twice in my life, and I'm sharing with you both times. But in this dream, I was standing with a group of people, and it was dark, and off in this direction there was a mountain. And I knew that's where God was. And I wanted desperately to go up to the mountain. But there was a man standing there and says, "No, you can't go." I'm like, "Why?" He said, "Look at your clothes." And I looked down at my clothes, and my what used to be white garment, it was dirty and it was soiled and it had just all kinds of stuff on it. He says, "You can't go." And I said, "What can I do?" And so he says to somebody I never see, "Give him a clean garment." And so as this dream is unfolding, I'm getting changed. I'm getting changed out of this dirty garment into this clean garment. And he comes and starts wrapping this thing around my head, and I wake up. And I go, God, what was that all about? And the next day I was driving somewhere to go speak, and I'm just troubled about all this. I'm like, God, here I am. I've got to go speak to people, and I'm going through things, and I don't think I'm worthy to be even, you shouldn't call me to go do these things. You need to get somebody else. I can't do this. And he says, go to Zechariah 3. So I pulled over, and I got my Bible out. And I turned over to Zechariah chapter 3. Then he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to oppose him. And the Lord said to Satan, the Lord rebuke you, Satan. The Lord who has chosen Jerusalem rebuke you. Is this not a brand plucked from the fire? Now Joshua was clothed with filthy or soiled garments, and was standing before the angel. And then he answered, and he spoke to those who were before him, saying, take away the filthy garments from him. And to him he said, see, I have removed your iniquity from you, and I will clothe you with rich robes. And I said, let them put a clean turban on his head. And so they put a clean turban on his head, and they put the clothes on him. And the angel of the Lord stood by and admonished Joshua, saying, thus says the Lord of hosts, if you will walk in my ways, and if you will keep my charge or keep my command, then you shall also judge my house, and likewise have charge of my courts. And I will give you places to walk among those who stand here. And it goes on from there. And so I'm reading this. And honestly, at the time, never even considered this passage of Scripture, just wondering, what was this dream all about? And this is what I was impressed with then. That, Bill, your garments have become tainted and polluted. Sometimes of your own making. Sometimes because of just dealing with circumstances and people and life and just doing what you have to do sometimes and getting involved with things that maybe you didn't want to get involved with. Whatever the case, your garments have become tainted. And if we're going to go up to the mountain, and if we are going to be priests unto the Most High God, there comes times when we have to recognize that our garments have become tainted, and we need to change our garments. We need to remove the filthy garments, and we need to put on clean garments. Or maybe we should put it this way, need to allow him to robe us once again in righteousness. To put off the robes of self-righteousness and allow him to clothe us with his robes of righteousness. When God called the priesthood to be set apart, I mean, you think about it, Israel is a set-apart nation. We're called to be a set-apart nation, a God Kadosh, holy nation. But among Israel, there were those who were called to be set apart from them, the Levi'im, the Levites. Meaning that the Levites were forbidden to do certain things that the rest of the tribes could do. But among the Levi'im, there were the Kohanim, there were the priests. And the priests were set apart from the Levites, meaning that they were more restricted in what they could do and couldn't do at certain times than what the Levites were. And so really what you have here in the priest is a picture of those who are set apart from those who are set apart from those who are set apart. And what is the distinguishing factor? Those who are set apart from all, that is the priests, are the ones who actually minister unto the Creator. They're the ones who minister unto him, and they're the ones that represent him to the people. And it resonates outwardly. Who shall ascend into the hill of the Lord, and who shall stand in his holy place? The one who has clean hands and a pure heart. The word there for pure is bar, actually. In Aramaic, of course, that means son. So who actually got to stand in the holy place? It was the priests. The ones who were to be called to be set apart from all. The ones who had to put on garments that were considered to be holy. In fact, look over with me in Exodus, I think it's chapter 28. Yeah, Exodus 28, verse 1. Now take Aaron your brother and his sons with him from among the children of Israel, that he may minister to me as a priest. Aaron and Aaron's sons, Nadab, Avihu, Eleazar, Itamar, and you shall make holy garments for Aaron your brother, for glory and for beauty. And so you shall speak to all who are gifted artisans, whom I have filled with the spirit of wisdom, that they may make Aaron's garments, to consecrate him, that he may minister unto me as priest. And he talks about all the different garments, so that he may minister to me as a priest. In other words, without these garments, it would have been impossible for him to minister to him as a priest. But here's something kind of interesting. Again, at least it is to me, that the Hebrew word there for garments, talking about the holy garments that the priests were to wear, the Hebrew word that is translated garment, its root actually means to cover, to be covert, and it's related to the concept of deceit. So the idea, the concept of deceit, being covert, about trying to cover something up, is tied to the garments that the priests were to wear, that they may minister unto the Lord. Why do I find that interesting? Because it's almost as just another subtle reminder that in the beginning, you see, it didn't have to be this way. Those who ministered unto me could freely eat of all the trees of the garden. They just had to steer away from that one that looked good, but was laced with something that was wicked and evil. It looked like it was good for food, but actually it was deadly. It looked good to the eye, but actually, you see, there's something that's going to kill you that's connected to that tree. It was a tree that was desirable to make one wise. That was the one they were to steer away from. But because they couldn't restrain themselves, they put off one set of garments. And then they ate this. They realized they were naked. And do you remember what they tried to do? They tried to conceal it. They tried to cover it up. They took fig leaves and they made aprons and they hid among the fig leaves. They were trying to hide. It's almost as if in the priestly garments, the word that is used there is to remind us that in the beginning, that first priest, he tried to cover up his sin. He tried to hide it somewhat, which then makes it necessary for the last Adam to come along. I find it very interesting that in Messiah's suffering, one of the things that happens is they strip him of his garments and they put a purple robe on him to mock him. Hail, King of the Jews. They take this purple robe on him to mock him. And then they strip him bare. He's laid naked, hanging on the tree. And why? So that it's possible for you and I to be able to lay aside our filthy garments, that we might be robed in his righteousness. I realize I'm not really telling you anything that you don't know. But my message here today is, from my heart, is we've been working out in the field. And working out in the field means clothes get dirty. We engage and interact with people. And sometimes we do the right thing. Sometimes we have the right attitude. Sometimes we say the right thing. Other times, no, we don't. We have the wrong attitude. We say the wrong thing. We do the wrong thing. And we get weary. And as we get weary, we become careless sometimes about what we're allowing to come into our lives and what we're allowing to pollute our lives and our minds, our attitudes. Sometimes it's just easier to take the position of being self-righteous than it is to be laid bare and to humble ourselves and to allow him to clothe us with clean garments, and to put a turban around our head, to renew our minds. I don't know about you, but I need my mind renewed again and again and again and again. We have an admonition, a warning, I guess you'd say, over here in the book of Revelation, chapter 3. And he speaks to a group called Laodicea in verse 14. To the messenger of the congregation of the Laodiceans write, these things says the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. I know your works, that you're neither cold nor hot. I could wish that you were cold or hot. So then, because you are lukewarm, which is a mixture of cold and hot, I will vomit you out of my mouth, because you say, I am rich and have become wealthy and have need of nothing, and you do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire, that you may be rich, and white garments, that you may be clothed, that the shame of your nakedness may not be revealed, and anoint your eyes with eye salve that you may see. And so as I read that, a couple things that come to mind. Is it dawned on anybody else that it seems like there's a lot of things being revealed these days? There's a lot of things that people have done in secret, apparently, that are now being revealed. That doesn't make me giddy. It scares me. Do you understand what I'm saying? All these congressmen and these senators that are being outed for different things, and all these Hollywood moguls that are being outed for all these things. Real easy for us to wear our robes of self-righteousness and say, sick 'em, God. But really what it should do is cause us to truly humble ourselves and to be in fear of the one who reveals those things that are done in darkness. Not to parade around in our robes of self-righteousness, but to humble ourselves. Because I'm telling you, folks, his voice, David read from Hebrews 12 about how we have been given a kingdom that is unshakable. Therefore, we need to be gracious. We need to serve God with this graciousness because our God is a consuming fire. That consuming fire is revealing things because his voice is shaking the heavens and the earth. That's what is also contained in Hebrews 12. And what that voice is doing, it is revealing those things that should be removed out of the way, and also revealing those things that are to stand. That's why he talks about this unshakable kingdom. So as all these things that have been done in darkness are being revealed, again, we shouldn't sit back and go, oh, this is great, this is wonderful. We should be in fear and respect of the fact that the Creator's voice is speaking right now. He is shaking heaven and earth. He is shaking the nations. So I don't want to be a Laodicean who sees myself one way only to have the Messiah see me in a different way. I don't want to think I'm walking around in clean white robes only to have him say, no, you can't go to the mountain yet because your robes are dirty. You need to put those dirty robes off, and you need to be clothed in robes of righteousness, clean white robes. You know what's kind of fascinating to me about the priestly garments, and this is particularly demonstrated on Yom Kippur. The high priest would have to put off the adornments, and he'd put on a plain white linen garment. But these garments of the priests, and including the adornments, they were made clean, they were made holy after they were sprinkled with the blood of the sacrifice that came off the altar. In other words, if I got this pictured in my mind right, these garments of the priest were considered holy, clean, pure if they were sprinkled with the blood that come off the altar. So in our definition of clean, bright, pure, white, They wouldn't be, because they'd be sprinkled, they'd be spotted with blood. And I think, obviously, you know where I'm going with this. Because those who are written of in the book of Revelation, those who've come out of great tribulation, it said they have made their robes white in the blood of the Lamb. I've been in ministry for a long time, 25 plus years. And I know that there are people who've been in it longer than I, and some people not as long, but I've been in it long enough to understand the idea that you get tired, you get weary, sometimes you just don't like people. A couple of you chuckle, the others going, why does he hold that microphone if he feels that way from time to time? But it is true. You get weary in whatever we do, just dealing with family. We get weary. And when we get weary, we have a tendency to let our guard down. And when we let our guard down, that's when these other pollutants, these things that get us dirty, that's when they come in. That's when they start getting in our head and our mind, and it starts affecting how we think and what we say and what we do. None of us are exempt from that. And for some reason, I felt like it was important to share this with you today, because I have this sense that a call is going forth, and that he's calling those who are listening. He's calling us to come up to the mountain. He's calling us to encounter him, to have this intimate encounter with him, that we hear his voice, but we have to take those robes that have become tainted, those attitudes, those actions, those deeds, those words that are not fruitful, that are not worthy of this name that we bear, and put those things aside, that he may clothe us once again with the robes of righteousness. Because you see, and I'll hush with this. I feel like I've been rambling all morning, but hopefully not. I truly feel like there's something is at the threshold. Something getting ready to happen. I don't know what, I won't pretend to. I think that it's not an accident that the President of the United States, after 70 years, officially recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Not that Israel needed his permission, which, that kind of amazes me, that people act like he needs our permission, or they need our permission to have their capital where they've always had it for 70 years. Craziness. But what has really kind of caught my attention is how there are people in this world that are losing their minds because the President of the United States recognized that the capital of Israel is Jerusalem. All right, now, it just kind of underscores this notion that the Creator has made Jerusalem a burdensome stone and a cup of trembling. It's all coming back to Jerusalem, and specifically, it's coming back to that little place there called the Temple Mount, Moriah, that is to teach us about things. And you know why I think it is? Because that's where it started. That's where everything started. Oh, I have to tell you this story. Maybe I shouldn't. Should I? Yeah, okay. Years ago, I was in Jerusalem, and I was at this hotel, and they had put us in this very nice room, had this big balcony. I could look out over the old city of Jerusalem, and over there was the Temple Mount and the Western Wall, and I'm already thinking, I believe that's where the garden was. I believe that's where the tree of the knowledge the tree of life was. And I just kind of taken in the view, and I look over there, and there is, on this hill over there, is the UN headquarters in Jerusalem. And it's on a different hill. And in fact, they called that hill the Hill of Evil Counsel. Not making this up. But here's the kicker. The word for counsel in Hebrew is etzah. And it's derived from the word etz, which means tree. In other words, there's the tree of life, and there's this other tree. All right, some of you got it. All right. But it's not an accident that the President of the United States, I don't think anyway, that the President of the United States, just before Hanukkah, 70 years later, has officially, on behalf of the United States, recognized that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, and the people of the world are losing their minds. You see, I believe there is a call going forth, and the call is, come up to the mountain. Come to the mountain. Come, let us go up. Right? To the mountain of the Lord. And what is he going to do? He is going to teach us his ways. But before we can go up to the mountain, metaphorically speaking, or literally, however you want to take it, the call is also going forth that we need to change our garments. That we need to put on clean garments. Why? Because we are a chosen generation. We are a royal priesthood. We are those that he has called to proclaim the praises of him, who has called us out of darkness into his marvelous light. Not that we can pat ourselves on the back because of this calling, but that we would be those that through us and in us, others would come out of darkness into his marvelous light as well. I feel like there's something else I'm supposed to share, and I'm just kind of waiting here for a second, if you don't mind. You have to know I come from a Pentecostal background, and so sometimes we just have to, wait on the Lord. I know that there are some in this fellowship who have been through a lot and had to deal with certain things not of their making, but just found themselves in a situation and asked to respond to it. All of us as individuals will find ourselves in situations not of our making many times. We didn't do it. We didn't do anything to create this situation, and yet here we are in the midst of it. There wasn't an angel over in the bushes saying, "Psst, don't go in that tent." He let us go in the tent. He let us go into that environment. He let us go into that situation. And why? Not to expose the evil of others. Not to expose the failure of others or the fault of others or the frailties of others. That's not anything to do with it. It's about, are you the kind of person that can bear the calling that's placed upon you? Are you worthy of that calling that you have been, that has been presented to you? It's not so much what other people are going to do, what other people are going to say, but what are you going to do? What are you going to say? How are you going to think? How are you going to act? And so the call goes forth again. So I am determined to lay aside my robes that I've allowed to become tainted and dirty with life and appeal to him to clothe me once again, to cover my shame, to cover my nakedness, as it were, and to clothe me with clean robes, with robes of righteousness, to wrap the turban around my head, to renew my mind, that I might refocus on him, and that we collectively might fulfill the call that he presents to us, to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, to be faithful ambassadors and representatives and witnesses to these people out here who have no idea what's getting ready to happen. Amen. God bless.
Hello everyone, Pastor David here. I hope you enjoyed the message this week. If you would like to see more messages, please go to Freedom Hill's YouTube page and join there, subscribe there, and you will see an assortment of teachings, devotionals, all kinds of great media that will help you and your family to do this thing called life, to live it in His ways and in His truth. Also, if these messages have blessed you and you would like to partner with us, you can go to our website and you will see the links where you can actually donate to help us get this word out to everyone. So I hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next weekend. Shalom.